Hi, my name is Erica. I'm a first-year student, master's for clinical counseling. I think that this topic is great for everybody because we all have it, and frankly, in every career, right?
Okay, thank you. And I will turn it over to our presenters.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad all of you all are here. We've been really excited to present on this topic. It's been a work in progress, so we hope that you enjoy it, and we want you to interact as much as possible. So we would appreciate any type of, kind of answers to our questions as we go. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end. So whatever you want to throw at us, please do. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. There it goes. Okay. Whoops. So we'll go ahead and just start with introducing ourselves. So my name is Lauren Roberts, and I am a pretender. So I pretend that I am, competent in being a mental health counselor. So I'm a registered mental health counselor, and also pretend that I am a counselor education and supervisor PhD student.
Hi, my name is Mason Greenwood, and I am a fraud. I am also allegedly a counselor, work with kids sometimes, most of the time. And I am also like to be a fraud as to be a PhD student here at the Travel School.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Deshane, and honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing. Half of the time, I feel like I'm a charlatan wearing a mask and pretending to be a counselor. I am a certified substance abuse counselor in the state of Virginia, and I'm working towards my hours in my residency in counseling to become a licensed professional counselor, which I will hopefully finish in July. Very excited. I am also pretending to be a PhD student. Sometimes, I guess, I'm in my second year with Lauren and Mason in our counselor education and supervision program. And we're all pretending that we know what the heck we're doing when it comes to writing a dissertation. But to be honest, we're all very lost.
Ain't that the truth?
We're just trying our best.
All right. So some learning objectives we're going to have today are participants will define imposter syndrome. Participants will understand the effects of imposter syndrome on clinicians, and participants will be able to cope with negative implications of imposter syndrome. So we're going to have some fun little pictures. So we hope you enjoy them because we enjoyed choosing them for you. All right. So what is imposter syndrome? Does anybody want to, I know it's up there, have, a guess on what they feel like imposter syndrome is maybe to them?
Yeah. To me, it kind of feels like I'm pretending to be something that I'm not. I don't actually have all these skills and capabilities. I've just somehow have tricked everyone into thinking that I have, whether it's with work or with school. And if I don't keep up the act, then everyone's going to find out and I'm going to look like a fool.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so it's doubting abilities and feeling like a fraud. So Imposter Phenomenon, so that historically began in 1978 to identify high achieving women who felt like they were not really bright and have fooled everyone. So it created feelings of discomfort in the workplace, having people second guess themselves, and minor anxiety, especially for women. Whereas men had feelings of doubt in the workplace and have their intelligence and hard work constantly validated. So that was kind of the difference where it kind of all started, was within the workplace for women in around 1978. So where did the terms imposter and syndrome come from? So imposter is, feeling of being anxious or unsure about joining, a new team, learning a new skill, or just, in your profession in general, and just knowing that you have, again, the competence, which will be in the next one, competence of where you are and, your knowledge and education. So syndrome recalls from female hysteria, which was diagnosed in the 19th century. So that kind of goes back to, women in the workplace where, the feelings of second guessing themselves, feeling like a fraud, and people portraying different kind of, putting blame on other people. So confidence does not equal competence. So competence is more like showing arrogance and being overconfident in oneself. But that does not necessarily mean that it portrays someone's knowledge and skill set. So we all in society need to be uplifting of everyone, of all diverse members of society. Just because someone's not showing they're confident in who they are and what they're doing does not necessarily mean that they don't know what they're doing and they don't have the education and the skill set to implement in their profession and what they're doing. Okay. Whoops.
So these are just some common thoughts that we came up with that you might have as an imposter. And I thought these were really interesting, and I wanted to include these because these are some that even you all, as you were doing your thoughts on imposter syndrome, were saying some of these exact same things, which is I'm going to get found out. I'll get found out. And so these are some of the top kind of comments that we found in our research. Is one is that I feel like I don't deserve any of the success I've attained. So not having that feeling of like that you're worthy enough to be where you are in either your program or in your academic or career journeys. Second is, even if people praise my skills, I still don't think I am as accomplished as they think I am. And this is just one of those negative thought patterns of only focusing on the negatives and not focusing on some of those positive feedbacks that we're getting, and then just being really concerned that like I'm not actually as good as, even though they're telling me I am, they're just saying that because they want to make me feel good. And then third is I might get rewards for my hard work, but don't feel like I have earned them. So again, it's a lot of common themes we're seeing of not feeling like we've earned it. We don't deserve this. We're not worthy. 4 is I'm afraid that people will soon realize that I am not as smart as I make myself out to be. This is mine. I feel like this is probably like my biggest one. I often just feel like I'm kind of winging things or going along with stuff just to make myself feel like I'm smart, but sometimes I don't necessarily understand everything. But then when I actually look at stuff, I'm like, okay, I actually do understand this material. I just don't feel like I do. Number 5, most of the accomplishments I have were just a fluke, or you're just owning it up to luck and not putting focus on your actual success and what you've done to get to where you are. 6, I find it difficult to accept compliments. And then 7, I downplay my achievements because I don't think they are as amazing as people think they are. And then this little graphic is really, really cute and funny because all the little eyes are like watching you. And I think we all probably feel that way sometimes, where we're like just constantly being watched by people around us. And oh gosh, they're going to find me out. I'm not good enough. Others are definitely better than me. So doing those comparisons to other people. And I do this in both my professional life as a counselor and in my PhD program. I find myself constantly comparing myself to where others are and not focusing on my own success and being focused on where I am with this process.
We're going to watch a video, and then while you're watching this video and listening into it, just try to think of ways like you try to combat it for yourself and what it looks like for you. I'd like to hear about that. Yeah.
after writing 11 books and winning several prestigious awards, Maya Angelou couldn't escape the nagging doubt that she hadn't really earned her accomplishments. Albert Einstein experienced something similar. He described himself as an involuntary swindler whose work didn't deserve as much attention as it had received. Accomplishments at the level of Angelou's or Einstein's are rare, but their feeling of fraudulence is extremely common. Why can't so many of us shake feelings that we haven't earned our accomplishments, or that our ideas and skills aren't worthy of others' attention? Psychologist Pauline Rose Clance was the first to study this unwarranted sense of insecurity. In her work as a therapist, she noticed many of her undergraduate patients shared a concern. Though they had high grades, they didn't believe they deserved their spots at the university. Some even believed their acceptance had been an admissions error. While Clance knew these fears were unfounded, she could also remember feeling the exact same way in graduate school. She and her patients experienced something that goes by a number of names: Imposter Phenomenon, Imposter Experience, and Imposter Syndrome. Together with colleague Suzanne Imes, Clance first studied imposterism in female college students and faculty. Their work established pervasive feelings of fraudulence in this group. Since that first study, the same thing has been established across gender, race, age, and a huge range of occupations, though it may be more prevalent and disproportionately affect the experiences of underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. To call it a syndrome is to downplay how universal it is. It's not a disease or an abnormality, and it isn't necessarily tied to depression, anxiety, or self-esteem. Where do these feelings of fraudulence come from? People who are highly skilled or accomplished tend to think others are just as skilled. This can spiral into feelings that they don't deserve accolades and opportunities over other people. And as Angelou and Einstein experienced, there's often no threshold of accomplishment that puts these feelings to rest. Feelings of imposterism aren't restricted to highly skilled individuals either. Everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance, where we each doubt ourselves privately, but believe we're alone in thinking that way because no one else voices their doubts. Since it's tough to really know how hard our peers work, how difficult they find certain tasks, or how much they doubt themselves, there's no easy way to dismiss feelings that we're less capable than the people around us. Intense feelings of imposterism can prevent people from sharing their great ideas or applying for jobs and programs where they'd excel. At least so far, the most surefire way to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. Many people suffering from imposter syndrome are afraid that if they ask about their performance, their fears will be confirmed. And even when they receive positive feedback, it often fails to ease feelings of fraudulence. But on the other hand, hearing that an advisor or mentor has experienced feelings of imposterism can help relieve those feelings. The same goes for peers. Even simply finding out there's a term for these feelings can be an incredible relief. Once you're aware of the phenomenon, you can combat your own imposter syndrome by collecting and revisiting positive feedback. One scientist who kept blaming herself for problems in her lab started to document the causes every time something went wrong. Eventually, she realized most of the problems came from equipment failure and came to recognize her own competence. We may never be able to banish these feelings entirely, but we can have open conversations about academic or professional challenges. With increasing awareness of how common these experiences are, perhaps we can feel freer to be frank about our feelings and build confidence in some simple truths. You have talent, you are capable, and you belong. Everyone can use a little extra kick of confidence sometimes. Find out some tips and tricks for boosting.
One thing that kind of comes up for me with that is, I don't know if any of you have heard of Prince EA or Prince Ia. He is a motivational speaker from St. Louis. And one of he does a lot of like motivational videos and just kind of like big motivational talks. And one of my favorite lines by him is, doubt has killed more dreams than failure ever has. That's probably one of my favorite quotes ever, because it's so true. Like I feel like we doubt ourselves so much that like we don't decide to start writing that book, or we stop ourselves from writing that research article because we're too scared that people are going to judge it. If anybody wants to share their experiences, we're happy to listen to it, or how you've combated it as an individual.
It's so interesting. No, go ahead. Was somebody else going to speak?
Go ahead,
Mary,
Mary.
I
You
think
can
you're
go.
good.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
It's so interesting. Last night I couldn't get to sleep, and I've done therapy counseling for years. And I had this couple after I had 6 hours of workshops yesterday, and I had this couple last night, and it was exhausting. And I went to bed, I couldn't get to sleep, and I thought, what could I have done differently? What didn't I do that I could have done? And I kept going through that in my mind. And then I got up and I had to write about it because it was bothering me so much. And I don't care how many years you've done therapy or counseling, there's always someone who comes along and you start saying, well, what else could I have done? Or you start questioning yourself. And of course, you know, I'll talk to someone and get supervision and blah, blah, blah about it all. But at that moment, it was just of the whole day and everything that all the workshops that I did and everything that went on. When I go to bed at night, this is the one thing I'm thinking about.
So
So it
journaling.
just-
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, you question yourself. I don't care how long you've done this.
Definitely. Yeah. It sounds like journaling really helps you.
Oh, it does. It does. Yeah. Thank you.
Something that has helped me personally when it comes to anything academic or professional is the notion that the worst thing they can say is no, and then I'm just going to be right back where I already am. So if I were to apply for a job that I really want, then they could say no, but I'm just going to be right where I am already if I didn't apply for the job. Or if I, were applying to this program, the worst thing that they could say is no. And then I'll have to find out where else to go to grad school, or if I'm going to go to grad school, and try to figure that stuff out. And I know when I was younger that it was definitely something that I was like, oh, well, they say no and my entire future is destroyed. But I guess kind of changing my mentality to, if they say no, then I'm already in the same boat that I am now, then it helps me realize that, things could always get better, but could they get any worse right now if I do or don't do the thing?
Well said. Thank you.
Something that really struck me about it is that the way the video started by presenting Maya Angelou and Albert Einstein, right? I'm already having like reactions and emotional, thoughts about these people, and then having the quotes, right, of reflecting, right, that even these people, right, felt some of that imposter syndrome. Coupled with presenting it as this is a universal thing. I was surprised at how much relief I felt in my body when I heard that and felt that and saw that. So that was kind of interesting for me to experience.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to look at people that have highly and overly have achieved, and we all, respect and still talk about them today, but acknowledging the fact that imposter syndrome has been real for so long. It's just now that we're starting to talk more about mental health and being more open about what anxiety is and internalizing the anxiety. It definitely helps to acknowledge that all these people that have highly achieved are probably feeling the same way we are. So it's relating to others and just being open and to sharing these stories. And I feel like that's what's helping right here is everyone's story is very different, and everybody handles all these anxieties of feeling like they don't belong where they are, they're not good enough, but knowing that everyone else experiences it that way, it has to be somewhat comforting.
Yeah. Drop in the chat if you feel this way. Raise your hand here if you're human, or put it in the chat. We're human, right? Now, who here puts themselves to a superhuman standard? Recognizing you're not alone. You're not superhuman, you're human. You can only take on what you can do. Nothing more, nothing less. And recognizing when it's too much too. That's one thing. I know me, Lauren, and Heather have talked about this a lot is taking on a lot more than we could handle, especially being doc students. I mean, I have 2 kids and I work full time, and I know Heather works a couple jobs, and being a doc student. So just being able to say no as well. Good.
Any more thoughts on this
Got a
slide?
couple tools in the chat of utilizing humor as a coping mechanism. If others around them are happy and smiling, then it just doesn't matter. And then burning themselves out with the unreasonable expectations of themselves. And saying yes to so many things at work as well.
Yeah, I mean, burnout is with imposter syndrome. That's real thing. You know, you can definitely burn yourself out without, you know, I mean, it's your anxiety burning you out, like overthinking, like I'm not constantly good enough, or I'm not supposed to be where I am. I mean, that definitely creates burnout.
One of the things I'm finding too, getting into this field is going to be a future counselor educator, is that a lot of counselors are introverts. We spend a lot of our social tank at work and stuff like that. And like when we go home, like we're tired, we're burnt out, we don't really want to talk to anybody, you know.
Jacqueline also said in the chat that the idea of perfection being necessary for success doesn't necessarily come from you. It comes from flawed systems and systems of oppression as well.
Absolutely.
True. Yeah. Add on to that too, you know, I've read research where social media has a big part of that comparison and the perfectionism. You know, why do all these people deserve these things that we see on social media? Why is their relationship so great and mine's not? Or why do they have that nice house and I don't? You know, so research shows that social media tends to amplify the comparisons with others as well, which I think, this is just my theory, that it throws fuel on that fire, on the perfectionism.
No, I agree with that. I want to touch on that. I had an experience where I was talking about, you know, social media and how everyone posts such, you know, positive things about themselves, like accomplishments, weddings, new houses, dogs, kids, you know, etc. But you never see people that post like really sad pictures of themselves, or, you know, or situations that are just detrimental to, you know, their emotions, you know. And if you post something that you're sad about, you know, you're seen as, you know, you're being a Debbie Downer by putting that on social media. It's not normalized that it's okay to be human on social media.
I really agree with that. And that's one thing that I've started to be more conscious of. And I actually share on social media when things are not going perfectly, so that people realize that, you know, it's not always stars and hearts and rainbows over here, y'all. You know, for example, I went on this really wonderful trip to Ireland back in February, but it got off to a terrible start. My baggage didn't make it, but I did. So I had no clothes for like 3 days. And had to go buy, and as a plus size woman, shopping in foreign countries can be really difficult. So the options were limited. And then I rented a car that I was supposed to have for 10 days. I kept it for 24 hours and returned it because I sideswiped another vehicle, which if anybody's been to the UK, they drive on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car. Everything's backwards. And so your brain is really just working against you. So I had accidentally, you know, scraped another car and then got a flat tire by myself. And this was supposed to be like my healing trip. And it ended up being the opposite of that. And it was just a really rough time. But I documented all of that on social media so that people could see, so that it wasn't, you know, people were seeing like the full truth of what I was really experiencing. And that, again, it's not always sunshine and rainbows over here. It's pretty rough too. And, but that's normal and that's life. And same thing with like my PhD journey and this whole process of writing a dissertation. I've started, you know, kind of documenting it online and how stressful it has been, and that it's not an easy thing to do. I'm just trying to come up with a title for mine right now. And this is harder than coming up with like my methodology, and like, how is that even possible? And I document it so that people see like, yeah, you know, I have these accomplishments and I'm doing cool things, but it's not always wonderful. You know, there's some downsides to it too.
Are you ready to move on to the next slide, or do we have any more questions, comments? All right, next slide.
Who does imposter syndrome affect? Start with students. You know, I have since retired. I no longer work in the school system because of COVID and everything else. I decided to move to private practice because just the way everything was going with COVID, it's definitely burning out. Like, you know, I'm feeling that as an adult, and I worked with little kids, K-3. Imagine how they're feeling. You know, and it takes one person to uplift one child. That's one thing I've learned in the school system. It takes one person to believe in them. Unfortunately, the way the school system is at this point in time, I think that a lot of the teachers' negativities and like the school staff negativities, I think those bleed down to the students. And I have seen that firsthand, how much that bleeds into those students, and not feeling like they do anything right, and having like unnecessary pressures on a second grader. You know, I see it in my son, who is a second grader. Clinician, new and seasoned. You know, I'm kind of in between that. I've been a clinician for about 5 years now, and realizing I still don't know everything, and believe it or not, I probably will never know anything. And I'm sure we have a mix of people in the audience that will be new clinicians, are veteran clinicians, and somewhere in between. And I'm sure you guys can all relate to that. Mary shared an example of, she said she's been doing therapy for a while, and she still has those cases that leave us awestruck, knowing that it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. One thing I've learned as a clinician is that it is the small victories. It's not the giant victories that are the most rewarding. Any discipline. I was in the Marine Corps. I've seen a lot of different people that work in different jobs and stuff like that. And, you know, like reflecting back on that, there's people, and I'm sure any discipline, that struggle with being an imposter. Oh, I don't deserve to be here. Oh, I'm not as good as I should be at this. Yeah, and somebody, I can't remember, somebody in the chat said something about burnout. It can absolutely lead to burnout because you are giving and expending so much of your energy being an imposter instead of trying to overcome that, and not trying, but you give so much energy to being an imposter, so much of yourself to being an imposter, that sometimes I'm just speaking for myself, but it sounds like other people can relate too. Like sometimes that's all I feel like I dwell on. Like, why do I deserve to be here? What have I done to deserve this? And like, even like our accomplishments are hard to say, I guess almost be humble and say, yeah, I did that. Like I did a great job with that, but I don't know, very hard. But next slide.
We want to read our little.
Oh yeah, sure. In order to overcome imposter syndrome, these students need to feel a sense of entitlement and belonging to help them develop as a student. Develop a student's identity, sorry. You switched it on me, so I guessed.
We also have a comment in the chat from Victoria, who said that the Marine Corps put a stigma on mental health as a whole, and then when transitioning to the civilian side after being injured, taken away from your identity, created her first feelings of imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to this a lot. A good way to put it is I burnt my lungs when I was in the Marine Corps. Like my esophagus to my lungs are covered in about 15% scar tissue. You know, and my goal was to retire from the Marine Corps. And I know like the first couple of years of being out, like I'm just like, now what? Like what do? I was kind of working at a warehouse where I threw boxes, and I was going to a community college at the time, and I felt so stuck. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Victoria, because I definitely can relate to that.
So I'm curious, as we read this quote at the bottom, what Mason was reading, in order to overcome imposter syndrome, these students need to feel a sense of entitlement and belonging to help them develop a student identity. Does anybody agree or disagree with this research?
Well, Colleen put in the chat that she thinks it's interesting that it uses that word entitlement, because I think that word has a lot of negative connotation, like she said, right? If oh, that person's so entitled, they expect things to come to them, or they expect things certain ways. But in this situation, entitlement can have a positive connotation, because in order to overcome the imposter syndrome that you're feeling, or feeling like you're a fraud, you need a sense of a little bit of entitlement, that I do deserve to be here, or I do deserve to have these things, by acknowledging our accomplishments and acknowledging the things that we have done to get here. And so in this case, I think in this situation, it's good to have a little of that sense of entitlement to overcome the sense of non-belonging.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it all goes back to, I know they said confidence does not equal competence, but, knowing that you're competent will help increase the confidence. So knowing that you are educated and you are knowledgeable, I think that's the sense of entitlement that, Heather and Colleen were, talking about, is knowing that you have what it takes to be where you are, and being confident in that, and knowing that what you've learned up to this point, and knowing what else you're going to be learning, that you're there, you deserve to be there, and that you belong. Okay. Next slide.
All right, so there's actually different types of imposters. So you might find yourself.
Sorry, I don't know why it's doing that.
Okay. You might find yourself relating to one of these 5 types, as I kind of go through each of them and talk about some of the characteristics or qualities of it. So the perfectionist is that person that focuses on how something should be done, and they want it 110% right, from any project or any assignment that they have, each and every time. And then if that standard isn't met, the imposter syndrome kicks in. It's not perfect. I didn't get an A+ on this. I only got an A, or I got an A-. Like, what's wrong with me? And some of the characteristics of the perfectionist type is that you always hold yourself to the highest possible standard. You're sometimes accused of being a micromanager and overseeing all the little tiny details. Even if you deliver a successful presentation, you'll kick yourself because you forget a minor detail. That happened to me yesterday. I had a slip of the tongue in my presentation yesterday, and Cheyenne was there, and she was like, was that a slip of the tongue? And I was like, yes, thank you for calling me out on that. And I kicked myself about it afterwards, even though it was a wonderful presentation overall, and it went really, really well, but my brain focused on that one little detail. And then you'll never settle for less than gold. Everything else is considered a failure. So that's the qualities of a perfectionist. And then moving on to the natural genius. This is that person who thinks that, you should always be smart or a fast learner or excel at literally anything you're ever taught. These people tend to be very hard workers, high achievers, and have a tendency to look at the pros in their field and wonder, why am I not where they are? And so doing a lot of comparisons. And so some traits of these are, they believe people are born talented or skilled and just automatically have the knowledge to do certain professions and jobs. They get frustrated easily and may quickly switch from one hobby to another if you don't pick it up right away, or you're not good at it right off of the bat. And they see everyone else around them as achieving success while they're the only ones failing, even though that's not necessarily the case. They're just going at their own pace or their own style. The expert, this is the person that is always striving for more. So more knowledge, more experience, more certifications, more awards, all of that. And even if they have that success and, you know, they're very knowledgeable in their specific field of expertise, they're always looking for more. It's never enough. I got to get all the letters behind my name. And those that have these, the expert traits are those that prepare themselves very fully by diving into all of the books, the courses, the training, the projects, before even attempting something new. This person might avoid applying for jobs because they don't meet all of the qualifications. And even if they've been doing this, you know, teaching or working in the job for years, they might still not feel like they're ever going to be enough. So that's kind of what the expert looks like. And then there's the soloist or the rugged individualist. This is the person who thinks they can do it all by themselves and they don't need nobody. I'm gonna just do it on my own. I don't need y'all. I don't need my, you know, coworkers or staff or faculty. I'm gonna just figure it out. They think that asking others for help or reaching out is a sign of weakness, because after all, shouldn't I just know what I should know what I'm doing. So why do I need to ask for help? So this person might feel like they need more time for prep. They prefer solo projects over group projects or group tasks. And these people are not going to ask for help even if they need it. And so they'll just kind of suffer in silence and try to figure it out on their own. And then last but not least, we have the superhuman, which Mason talked about earlier, the Superwoman Superman. This is the person that wants to take on all the responsibility. They might have a hard time saying no. They, you know, work, you know, very, very hard or like harder than other people and their peers and tend to have burnout very easily. This is the person that's juggling a lot of tasks, like Mason was saying earlier, even to the point of overexhaustion and knowing that they're overexhausting themselves, but just continuing to do it. So some signs that you might be a superwoman or a superman is that you juggle multiple tasks at once. So this could be work, chores, household stuff, school, a side hustle, whatever. You find you often work a lot of overtime past your, you know, team's working hours, and you neglect other things like friends and family or hobbies in order to work more and more. And Crystal, I see you ask, can you be all of them over time? Yes. And you might have a little sprinkling of each of these and be the ultimate imposter. So I love that there's different types because you can kind of identify and you know, see where you fall. So me, I think I'm a little of all of these, but if I had to pick one, I am the superwoman. I think I can do everything to the point where I have a really hard time saying no. And then I end up just completely exhausted and complaining in the group chat to Lauren and Mason. You know, I work full time. I'm at my job right now. I'm doing this from my job. And I have a side job as a private practice counselor. I'm also doing my PhD, and I decided it would be a really great idea to continue to TA this term also, because I have a hard time saying no. And I feel like saying no to people somehow shows them that I am incompetent and I can't handle everything. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, where do you think you fall into these little snippets or people?
I definitely feel like I have always found myself to be the natural genius, probably because I was one of those gifted kids when I was young. But then by the time I got to high school, I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to do any of that. I realized I actually had to work for my grades, and I didn't know how to do that. And so the first time I got a B, I cried because it just wasn't like me, and I was afraid that I was going to let everyone around me down because I wasn't fulfilling that role of the natural genius. And I had to work so hard for my grades, but everyone still thought that it just came naturally to me. So then they're saying that oh, you don't even have to try it. Meanwhile, I'm struggling and crying and burning myself out on schoolwork, and everyone just thinks it's so easy.
Absolutely. Dr. Foster in the chat said super/soloist with the hand raised, like right here. Yep, very relatable, very relatable. All right, so next we're going to talk about some of the costs of imposter syndrome, which we probably haven't even thought about. Like, what does this cost us? We can actually put monetary value onto this. Burnout and stress from spreading ourselves too thin can cost us about $988 a year. And this is because it puts your health on the back burner and your mental health on the back burner too. So tension from goals that you can't reach can cost about $2,200 a year. And then putting your health on the back burner and lack of sleep can cost about $2,500 a year in like productivity and the cost of your health. Again, decreases in productivity and mood can cost businesses $3,400 per employee each year. So if we're all, just really struggling and we're all working at the same company, then our company's tanking. We are not doing well with taking care of ourselves. Avoiding salary talk and not negotiating your worth because you don't feel like you're worth it can cost you $7,500 a year. This is something that I have gotten like super better about and I like hound my HR department all the time because I'm going to be licensed soon. So I'm like, so about that raise. So know your worth and advocate for it. And then on average, we spend about $18,000 annually on unnecessary purchases. And this is often as like retail therapy to make ourselves feel better because I'm burnt out and I'm tired and I need to buy this thing to make me feel better. And this could have been saved or, put away to take care of our mental health and take care of our physical health. So yeah, this can cost you. Imposter syndrome can cost you your mental health, your physical health, and your financial health.
All right, let's see. I can't see this slide because that thing's in the way. Can you read the top of it, Heather? I can't read just the title of what this slide, because the thing's in the way, the bar's in the way.
Yeah, it just says how to increase your awareness.
Okay. So I think we've already kind of talked about each of these, but is there fear behind imposter syndrome? I think we definitely have decided that there is a lot of fear behind imposter syndrome just because we all have internalized the fact that we're not good enough and we fear if we do something the right way or the wrong way, that it's not going to either be good enough or we're not doing it correctly. And I feel like we also fear about discussing if we're an imposter with other colleagues and also supervisors and mentors as well, because we don't want to feel like we're alone in how we're feeling and what we're thinking and, get kind of, oh, how come you feel that way? You shouldn't be feeling that way. And just kind of having all that fear and anxiety behind it. Stereotypes. So there is a lot of stereotypes, especially I think a lot has to do with, definitely with cultures such as like age. I know that I, especially being, I guess a younger clinician working with adults and working with parents and working with couples, it's difficult to not have the fact that like, oh, sitting here, am I actually going to provide these people with the right amount of services? Am I going to actually help them improve? And then also having the, reassurance of when people say, oh, you seem very young. And I'm like, well, okay. So sometimes that kind of makes you internalize the fear of being an imposter as well. Again, with the discrimination and being judged, I think that also goes back to, cultural identities and, also it goes back to, where you are in the profession and always just kind of second guessing, are you the best for this person? Is somebody better? Or maybe if somebody doesn't show up to a session or someone, gives you some sort of negative feedback, you might, judge yourself and feel like, okay, well, I'm not good enough. How can we normalize imposter syndrome? Definitely by, just being more educated by it, by talking about it, advocating for ourselves, talking with being a new clinician, talking with your supervisors about feeling like you're an imposter, talking with your educators, talking with, your coworkers. Just, I guarantee you, if you talk to all these other people and confide in them about what your thoughts are and how you're feeling, you're probably going to get a lot of people that relate to who you are. I don't think I've ever talked to someone and they didn't relate to how I was feeling, or they gave me good advice and, made me feel a lot better. And just talking about it, with having anxiety, you talk about it and it's not as scary as when you talk about it, or what Mary was saying, journaling about it. So kind of finding the coping skills to help you normalize it for yourself. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So we kind of, hopefully you've been reflecting over the last couple of slides. So just by thinking on your personal experiences in the counseling program, we kind of want you to share your ideas on how to normalize imposter syndrome and what your thoughts are. So I'll start. Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
For me, I kind of feel like I have some capabilities and some skills in one realm of a counseling, program and capabilities, but then on the other side of it, I'm just not competent at all. Like, I feel like I maybe don't do as well when it comes to the research or the assignments that we have to do, or anything that requires me having to, deal with these research topics that I haven't never considered before. But then when we do any role playing sessions with, like, here's a person who has a problem, try to help them through it, I feel like I do really well with that kind of stuff. So is it a matter of I just need to have more experience and I'll get better at the research side of things? Or am I always just going to be destined to be better as a talker than a researcher? And how am I going to make it through my program if I don't do well as a researcher? And it just kind of feels like what I'm good at doing isn't enough to kind of balance things out. Sorry, I guess I didn't share any ideas on how to normalize it.
That's okay. No, I appreciate that. I know when I was in the master's program and learning how to counsel, doing the role plays and like not first, ever kind of talking and role playing with the client, I would see other classmates and I would judge how I would interact in my role plays. And I would be like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here because obviously I am terrible at what I'm doing. But, I think more of the practice and, vocalizing what your fears are with, challenging those fears and those negative beliefs are very helpful. I think it all just really goes back to advocacy.
Erica in the chat also said that attending trainings like these help you realize that you're in good company.
Absolutely.
I think it's also important to continue one's own therapy, because I think a lot of the issues that come up with the imposter syndrome are things that one needs to deal with within themselves too. It's not just to deal with the profession, but I think the not feeling good enough, they have to be perfect. A lot of that can go back to family of origin issues. And so I think it's so important. I don't care how long you do this work or how old you are, then I think it's important to continue one's own therapy.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Mary, because definitely going to counseling and like feeling that you're not good enough, like you said, could relate back to family. And like when you're like younger, like with the core beliefs and something happening and, trying to recognize what that core belief is and where it came from. And then acknowledging like how that's like what's triggering that core belief and how is that creating a certain emotion in you? And then how are you behaving on it? And then allowing that cycle to keep going. So I agree, definitely, continue going to counseling, whether you feel like, you you got it by yourself or you have, really good friends and family and support, it's definitely always important to work on yourself and explore things that you might not ever have thought of. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm going to keep this very short and brief just because we want to ensure that there's time for questions or if anybody else wants to share any more experiences, but just some implications. The negative side mainly just I feel like it should be like bullet pointed, like under burnout, all these things, having imposter syndrome for so long can cause burnout, which in turn causes harm to clients, inability to be compassionate, fatigue, all of that. And then positive increases self-esteem and trust in abilities, just trying to get out of that imposter syndrome, builds up resilience. Resilience is so important for our clients, for ourselves, for our families, every aspect. Building up resilience is just crucial. Professional and personal growth. I'm a big believer that, I always ask my clients to have one professional and at least one personal goal. If I'm going to ask them to do that, I better have those myself, which I always try to do. Abilities to accept flaws and uniqueness, realizing that you're not perfect and that you are going to make mistakes and that you are not going to know everything. And sometimes that's hard to admit, to have that humility, and professional self-disclosure, being able to say, hey, this is out of my scope, so I'm going to have to refer out.
All right. Well, we've kind of always talked about our experiences throughout, so we're going to pass it, but I really like this picture. So it's so cute. Even animals can be imposters too.
Yeah.
Oh, and we got the dog trying to be like a penguin. Oh, which one's the raccoon and which one's the cat?
These are just some basic ways to cope. And we've been talking about this whole time, but self-care is so important, you guys. Find ways that you can take care of you and implement it. Use grounding techniques, mindfulness, guided imagery, to help feeling with those feelings of fatigue and burnout. Develop your own professional and personal identity. Who are you as a counselor? Who are you in your program? And don't compare that to anybody else. Prevent burnout by knowing and recognizing the signs of burnout. And recognizing who you can go to for support. So obviously in our program, we have our faculty, we have doc students who are available a lot of times for different things, counselor educators, your supervisors, your faculty, your staff, lots of people. So just know the signs, know that you're not alone, understand that this happens to a lot of people. Be kind to yourself. I love the idea of tracking your success and keeping up with those things that you've accomplished so that you can reflect back on them. Say yes to opportunities, but be mindful that it's okay to say no. I don't have to always do all of these. And then talk it out. Talk with a mentor, talk with your manager, talk to your classmates and your cohorts, and reach out for support. There's so many people out there. And then we've been kind of doing that this whole time. That's the mask. What would your mask look like if you were an imposter? So something to just think about. My mask is a happy shining face every day at work, but internally I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is great. I'll figure it out. This is fine. So I think we all wear a mask sometimes when we're in this profession or in these fields. But I do want to open it up for questions now. If anybody does have any questions about imposter syndrome, some of the ways that it affects us or ways that we can cope.
I actually have a question. So one of the things that you guys have highlighted regarding the negatives, the things that you do see, it seems to me that it kind of leads to a cognitive dissonance. the point that it affects one's actions. The culture diversity of it probably is going to be different for each one individual. And so it can get to the point in terms of severity to very severe, right? To the point that a person, because they self-doubt themselves of going to the doctor, they're not going to go to the doctor at all. I haven't looked at the statistics itself with imposter syndrome or the prevalence rate. Would you consider it as a diagnosis itself then? Or correct me if I'm wrong. And if so, it is important. That might be helpful for a lot of clients coming into mental health clinics who, especially in my state, for Medicaid, they require a diagnosis itself for treatment. Which is important because, I mean, for treatment planning purposes and research, would that be helpful in terms of helping an individual
Sure.
with that?
So that's not an actual diagnosis, but it can definitely cause symptoms of other things. So for purposes like you were saying of insurance and billing and all of those fun things that we love to deal with, we look at how the imposter syndrome is affecting the individual person itself. So for some people, that might be depression, feelings of worthlessness, feelings of sadness and guilt and shame that they're not as good as they could be. For others, this might be anxiety. It might have this, I have to constantly be doing all of these things all the time or I'm not good enough. So you want to look at, because it is not a specific diagnosis, is how is it affecting the person and what's that diagnosis? So it could be an anxiety diagnosis. It could be a depression diagnosis. You would look at those symptoms versus, again, there's no imposter syndrome diagnosis.
Could even be related to trauma.
It could be, yeah. If there's a history of trauma and, that person has a history of being told all the time, that they're not good enough or they suck, have all these really pervasive negative messages from past experiences, that could relate to trauma. So absolutely. And it can lead to imposter syndrome. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Very good question.
Any other questions?
I definitely agree with that. And I mean, there's a lot of factors as well, and the risk factors, individual, and so is there statistics in terms of how which individuals might have some research based on which individuals might prevalent to that imposter syndrome?
So the research that we found showed, and it talked a little bit about it in the little TED Talk video, is that women and people of color, there's a lot of high rates of it in those populations specifically.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, guys, it looks like we are out of time. Colleen says that we are at time. So thank you all so much for coming. We really hope that you guys got something out of this. This has been a labor of love. We have worked on this for literally a year, and perfecting it and trying to get it, submitted somewhere for presentation. So we were very excited that we had this opportunity. And thank you all again for being here. And keep going out there and doing the best that you absolutely can. We're all just doing the best of what we've got, y'all. So
Thank you for the presentation, you guys.
thank you.
Diane, for your help. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Have a nice day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.